his wife and daughter went abroad for 9 years. When they returned, she was a cold corpse. Her face was covered in injuries, and all her organs had been removed. Old Huang was completely stunned. He didn't know what his wife had gone through before her death, and his 9-year-old daughter was also missing. According to routine investigations by the Thai police, his wife's last phone call was from a middleman. But this middleman was not an ordinary person. He was a target for an underground criminal gang that sold organs. The contact person for the target used real estate sales as bait, specifically targeting people with children. After figuring out the client's close relatives, he would seize the opportunity to abduct their children. This person had been in contact with Lao Huang's wife for over a year. This moment completely ignited Lao Huang's fury. The criminal gang never imagined they had offended a top assassin of the South Korean mafia. Lao Huang quickly set off for Thailand. After several twists and turns, he finally found the intermediary. At this time, the intermediary was still unaware of the danger. When the man arrived, Lao Huang had already hidden in the car while he was shopping. He took the man, who was fishing, to the outskirts of town. The middleman, terrified, claimed he knew nothing and even threatened Lao Huang. Without a word, Lao Huang used pliers to cut off one of his fingers. Only then did the man realize Lao Huang's methods and finally confessed the truth. He admitted that he had indeed conspired with the woman's nanny to kidnap the child, and that when the woman came to ransom her, the organization cut off her finger. The organ handler threw the body into the stinking ditch. Old Huang asked him where the child was, but he stammered and refused to answer. Old Huang grabbed the pliers and aimed them at the man's ears. Dead, 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 dead. At this moment, Old Huang's only hope was gone. All that remained was revenge. He ruthlessly severed the man's head and neck, his eyes filled with rage. He swore he would avenge his wife and daughter. That night, Bao was at home. The lights in the kitchen suddenly went out. When they were turned on, the woman and her husband were found tied up. He had smuggled himself across the border from the cliffs and barely understood Korean. Old Huang said that if she wanted her husband to live, she should answer him obediently. He showed her a picture of their daughter and asked where the body was and who had ordered it. The woman still wouldn't speak. Old Huang then cut off one of her husband's fingers. Now Old Huang's hope was rekindled. The woman said the gang leader had sent someone to pick up the child, but she didn't know the exact address. Unbeknownst to him, in his haste to find his daughter, Old Huang asked someone to introduce him to a Korean woman named Hua Jie, who was undergoing renovations there. Hua Jie became his translator and tour guide. Unbeknownst to him, while he searched for his child, someone else was desperately searching for him. This person was also a killer, but Old Huang was even more ruthless. He loved to hang people up like pigs and personally dismember them. He was a butcher feared throughout the land. And not long ago, his brother was killed by Lao Huang, so he vowed to find Lao Huang and kill him and his only remaining relative. Lao Huang had Hua Jie pretend to buy an organ and contact Blackstone. They sincerely said they wanted a kidney. Sure enough, not long after, a driver called them into his car. Soon the two were taken to a hotel. However, when they opened one of the doors, they were completely shocked. There were more than a dozen children imprisoned there. But Lao Huang didn't find his daughter. He told the seller that the woman, after speaking to the child, confirmed there was indeed one, but said they were too late and the child had already been reserved. Old Huang wanted to see the child, but the woman said the child had been moved elsewhere. Old Huang demanded the girl return, offering to pay for the equipment himself. However, sensing their ulterior motives, the woman chased them away. Old Huang, unwilling to give up, angrily returned. kicking the door lock and asking the children if they had seen their daughter. At this moment, a little boy slowly got up and said he'd had seen him before. Old Huang excitedly asked where the child was now, but the boy said he had been taken for surgery. At this point, Old Huang didn't react. What surgery? When he lifted the boy's clothes, he realized everything. The boy said he only remembered that there was a place where you could play football. And there were many footballs. Looking at these pitiful children, Old Huang asked Sister Hua to take them all away, but they seemed to have already experienced too many terrible things. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Sister Hua!" Pretending to be just passing by, the other person pressed a gun against her neck. Sister Hua was terrified. Then, Old Huang suddenly rushed out, quickly disarming the man and punching him. He then pinned another man against the wall and shoved the magazine into his body. Another thug rushed forward with a knife, but Old Huang easily and recklessly slammed him to the ground. Only the shop owner remained, terrified, pretending to be a horse. Old Huang was dead. He grabbed him and demanded to know where the child was. The woman, terrified, finally told the truth. Someone had coveted the girl's heart and might already be on the operating table. Old Huang asked for the exact address, but he didn't know either. At that moment, the boy beside them called out a name, saying he knew the place. Just as they were about to take the child to their destination, the woman suddenly screamed and collapsed, covered in blood. It turned out the butcher had found. Old Huang told Sister Hua to quickly take the child and leave first while he led the butcher up. When the butcher came up, Zilan immediately engaged him in a deadly battle. The two fought fiercely, their strength evenly matched. Old Huang had no intention of continuing the fight. He only wanted to save his daughter. He threw the butcher away, closed the gate, and ran out through the window. But at that moment, Sister Hua, carrying the child, was stopped by the police because she was an escaped human trafficker. Old Huang witnessed this scene but couldn't react in time. He quickly turned and ran away to save Sister Hua. Fortunately, the human trafficker's hideout was raided and all the helpless children were rescued. However, at the same time, the Thai mafia boss was also angered. Meanwhile, Lao Huang, after making inquiries from various sources, found the football factory on his own. It was ostensibly processing footballs, but in reality, it was a black market for organ trafficking. Lao Huang arrived at the building across the street when suddenly a little girl touched her head. He recognized her as his daughter. But at that moment, the car stopped on the side of the road. Someone got in and took the child away. Old Huang spurred his horse and chased after them. Just as he was about to reach the child, suddenly a tricycle overturned in front of him. There stood the vengeful butcher. Without a word, he loaded his gun and fired directly at Old Huang. The windshield shattered instantly. Old Huang ducked, gripped the glass tightly, and tried to back away, but the butcher, like a madman, fired wildly. At the same time, the police blocked Old Huang's path. A chaotic melee erupted instantly. Ignoring everything else, Old Huang charged forward, headlong. They escaped the encirclement, but by then the girl had already been wheeled onto the operating table. The doctor was disinfecting and preparing to remove her heart. Old Huang ran for his life, finally arriving at the last moment. He angrily fired 3 shots at the police officer. At that moment, he finally saw his daughter. He carefully picked her up and settled her in a small room. He gently wiped her cheeks. This was the first time he had been so close to his daughter. It ended because of his identity. Especially to protect the pregnant Cizi, she was sent to Thailand. Meanwhile, Sister Hua was also released. Old Huang said he needed to find a bed to smuggle himself across the border, and wanted Sister Hua to help look after the child again. But Sister Hua was already terrified, and didn't want to get involved anymore. Old Huang had to think of another way. He bought his daughter a new set of clothes and gave her a baby. But the girl didn't say a word from beginning to end, just quietly watching him. Afterwards, he took his daughter to a different hotel. A psychologist was also called in. Fortunately, after the examination, there was nothing seriously wrong. Old Huang asked the psychologist to look after him for 10 minutes, saying he would be right back. He had already contacted Rabbit's boat. On the way back to the hotel, the gang had already arrived. Old Huang quickly dealt with several people and hurried back to his room. However, there were too many of them. In the ensuing fight, Old Huang was also stabbed in the abdomen. When Old Huang returned to his room, covered in wounds, the butcher was already waiting for him. It turned out that in order to kill Old Huang, the butcher had long been allied with Black Panther from Thailand. Old Huang was immediately knocked to the ground, begging the butcher to release the child. But the cold-blooded butcher wouldn't change his mind. Old Huang angrily tried to kill him, but was crippled in one blow. Just as the men were about to take him away, the butcher suddenly turned his gun on him. He planned to take Old Huang back and slowly torture him, bribing 2 henchmen at double the price to send Old Huang to a designated location. Fang, unaware that the paid rider had already arrived at the garage, drove up and rammed into the car just as Lao Huang was being taken away. He then rushed to untie Lao Huang, but by then the butcher had already left with the child. Lao Huang chased after them, angrily firing at the butcher. Then, in a flash, he jumped in from behind and locked the butcher in his arms. The two fought inside the car until the car crashed, bringing them to a stop. At this moment, Lao Huang heard cries coming from inside the suitcase. He thought,